Hello, this week I wanted to show you a 1 minute time lapse of 20 minutes worth of work of free motion quilting on my long arm. I'm doing a 6-inch sashing in between rows of stars in a curl, vine, and leaf pattern. It's all free motion, no computers, hand guided. As you can see, I'm going through very slowly, and I have to even go back in one of the carpenter wheel stars to finish a little section that needed to be finished. Then I move on to the furthest right hand borders where I'm doing the vine and leaf background stitch again with a ribbon candy in the pieced border, and then repeating the vine and leaf pattern in the outer border. I just wanted to show you free motion quilting is tedious and it takes a lot of time. So this week I wanted to make a video on loving your long armor because I do some long arming and I don't take quilts from the public anymore. I do my own, and I have a few that I'm doing for some friends. But I've seen a couple comments recently on social media that I just wanted to comment on because I think people have a misunderstanding about what long arming can be. Now, for someone like me, I free motion quilt everything, so I let people know that. I don't use a computer. It is still labor intensive if you use a computer. And people, I think, believe there's just some quick magic that makes long arming your quilt happen fast, it's overnight, and it's magical. Well, it can be, but there's nothing fast about it. I can long arm a quilt faster than I used to hand quilt or using my domestic machine. But we need to love our long armers in the fact that they are busy people and they have a lot of quilts, they have a lot of life to live, and maybe many long armers, this isn't their primary job. You have to understand, if you're free motion quilting, you're standing at a quilt frame with your arms in a position like driving for periods of time. And if you are doing computerized quilting, you're still standing at a frame quite often. You still have to do monitoring of what's going on, measuring, loading, and everything. So, first thing in loving your long armor is making sure that your quilt has the threads they're all clear. Press your blocks as flat as you can. Square up your quilt as much as possible, and thoroughly squaring it is preferred, but I don't always square mine up, but I want to make sure that it is not a parallelogram. The larger the quilt, the more you can get some parallelogram action versus that. I've had them. Number 2 is measure your quilt and ask your long armor how big her frame is. My frame is about 110 inches. That means I can't do 120 without taking it on and off the frame and only quilting zones. I don't do quilts over 110, but that means the quilt on the short side should really only be 90 to 94. So otherwise, it's really hard to do, and it's very labor intensive. Some people have a 14-foot frame, but not many. Don't make a massively oversized quilt thinking you'll find a long armor right away who will be able to do it. So the second thing is press your entire quilt as flat as possible, making sure that you bring it maybe hanging on a hanger so it's not wadded up, doesn't have dog hair on it, it's free of stains. Vintage quilts, you better check with a long armor. To be honest, vintage quilts tops that are found don't always quilt up well. I've done it a couple times. I've had a couple of mixed results. The long arm needle is big, it punches big holes, and the machine goes fast. So the problem is if you have rotten seams, they pop and punch holes, and I've had issues. The other part is making sure you have your 1/4 inch seam allowance and that all your seams are tight, because as they roll it through the frame, pop goes the seam. And once they're popped, it's really a lot of work to hand stitch seams, ladder stitch them. Most long armors won't do that. Sometimes I will try to do my best. The other part is make sure your borders aren't waving like the sea. If they are, they will not quilt out, and you're going to have pleats and tucks having to be put in your border. Some long armors won't even deal with it. It's really hard. The other part is make sure the blocks don't dome or bubble. You can't quilt it out. You can't. I've seen a couple comments about, yeah, it'll quilt out. Not if it's a big Mount Rushmore in the middle of the quilt. Piecing your back is okay. Careful that your back stays flat. I prefer 4 inches on each side, top, and bottom. You've got to have room for the wonk, and you got to have room to work with. As you quilt, it will draw up the back, and that can be a problem. The other part of loving your long armor is don't pressure them into doing something as a rush job for you. Because, did you watch The Princess Bride? One of my absolute favorite quotes is when Billy Crystal is asked to perform a miracle, and he's asked to hurry up because they kind of in a hurry. And his answer is, don't rush the miracle man or you get a rotten miracle. Don't rush your long armor or it might not be the best work. I also have a specific thread I work with, and I can't replicate things that people see in a quilt magazine. I can jump off on that as an idea, but remember, I do freehand, and some people don't have the ability to just purchase whatever pattern you saw in a quilt magazine. And some people can't use specific threads. So don't buy thread and take it to the long armor. Don't pin your quilt together because they need it to roll on. And the other part is batting. You need to chat with them if there's specific battings they can't use due to allergies, or maybe they can't use specific kinds on their machine. Always double check. But most people can use cottons, wools, bamboos, or blends. I have a hard time with polyester, just to be honest. It doesn't always lay right. The last thing is, don't disparage your long armor on social media, because I've seen things like, I just had a little quilt and it took them 3 months to do it. The stitch length and stuff is something you might want to talk about. Some people use really large stitch lengths and some people don't. Double check on it. The other thing is you're going to want to discuss thread choices, things, maybe look at some threads that they have on hand or colors, and maybe you can ask them which thread they use so you can kind of look at thread colors and get a rough idea. Those are things. And now, I do love, but I also hate, is do whatever you want on the quilt. Well, you might be paying for a custom job. Maybe that wasn't your intention. Or, maybe you don't really want it densely quilted. Maybe you wanted it big, or it came back with big spaces and you wanted it denser. So a lot of communication is very important. So don't expect miracles. Don't expect things that long arm machines are just going to crank it out. People run these businesses. They're people. A lot of people have to hand guide them. Even if they're doing a edge-to-edge pattern, they are driving the machine, following a pattern that's on the table. It's hand guided. And people who have fully automated still have to do a lot of work. So love your long armor. if you take it to Longarmer, do a lot of chatting, look at their work. I love to set up time with people and show them some ideas and options. Um, those are a few tips I have about dropping a quilt off at a Longarmer and expectations. Talk about it first so that you aren't disappointed and get a rotten miracle. Nobody wants that. Um, the other part is just really do your best on quilting. You're piecing the blocks because everybody expects that there are going to be some imperfections or problems with quilts. But a lot of things like the ruffle borders or blocks that have domes in them, that doesn't quilt out, and sometimes that can lead to some disappointment in the results. But if you do your best, have a flat block, it's squared up, you have a backing and batting that's at least 4 inches larger than your top, you communicate about what kind of stitching you want, you should have a very lovely result. And be honest about timelines. If they have a 90-day turnaround time, that means 90 days. Make sure you drop off a quilt for birthdays, graduations, and weddings well in advance. Christmas, that's another one. September, October, most people are done taking quilts to Longarm for Christmas. So it's May. You can maybe be thinking about dropping a quilt off at Longarmer, and hopefully you'll have results that you're absolutely pleased with. Have a great day, and I hope that you have time to do some quilting and making this week. We'll see you next time.